interestingly enough, naming a business was more difficult than naming my son. Um,
Hello readers, I'm Victoria Wood and you're listening to Biblio Happy Hour, the show that shares new book releases, we chat to the authors who write them, and the people who sell them. Every week, we'll share some of the new books that will be hitting bookshelves that week. We'll invite an author or two or more on the show to talk about their debut or newest release, and we'll introduce you to an independent bookseller and their bookstore so you can stop by, get tailored book recommendations, and pick up some new books when you're in town. So make space on your bookshelves, follow us on social media, and make sure you're subscribed to Biblio Happy Hour wherever you listen to your favorite shows. Readers, Biblio Lifestyle is a newsletter, community, and space for people who can't live a life without books in it. Every Friday, you'll get a special treat in your inbox filled with inspirational content, book recommendations, self-care tips, original interviews, and things we think you'll enjoy. The best part? You'll only receive one email per week, and it will be an amazing 5-minute read or less. So if you're not on the list, sign up now for our free weekly delivery at bibliolifestyle.com. I've included a link in the show notes so you can sign up there. This week, I'll be chatting to bookseller Lisa Lamberson from Bright Side Bookshop, located in Flagstaff, Arizona. We'll be talking about the bookstore, her town of Flagstaff, what readers can expect when visiting her bookstore, and how she got involved in the book business. Lisa, thank you so much for coming on the show, and welcome to Biblio Happy Hour.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Victoria.
We're so happy to have you here. So before we get started, really quick, are you a coffee or a tea person?
Ooh, previously coffee, and now I'm very much into London fog, so I'm calling myself a tea person now.
I love both coffee and tea, so we're both playing on the same team here.
And I guess it just depends on the day, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It depends on the day, and also for me, the time of day, because I find myself lately starting with a bit of coffee, and then to wind down, I go back to my tea, so...
And I'm never a coffee or tea person afternoon. I can't do it. It'll keep me up in the middle of the night, so...
Yeah. I think most people can definitely relate to that. Alrighty, so tell us about your bookstore, tell us about Bright Side Bookshop, tell us about where you're located in your town, plus also, just feel free to share anything that's good that you would recommend for someone who is visiting Flagstaff.
Sure. Bright Side Bookshop is a bookshop that's just been around for about 2.5 years. Myself and my husband and our business partner, the three of us, bought the bookshop in 2017. It was an existing bookstore that had been around only for a few years as well, and it went up for sale. And we couldn't stand the thought of seeing our newly renovated indie bookstore in the community leave us so soon. And so we rallied the troops and purchased the bookstore. And it's located in historic downtown Flagstaff, which is a lovely, quaint little space just off of Route 66 and near the historic train station in town. And for those that might not know, Flagstaff is the lesser known part of Arizona. We are at 7,000 feet, and so we're a 4-seasons climate. And we have snow in the winter, which is amazing, and a local ski area. And we're also somewhat of the gateway to the Grand Canyon. We're about an hour and a half away from the Grand Canyon. So plenty of visitors coming through town for that.
Wow. See, I had no idea it snowed. I know it sounds silly, but when you mention that you have 4 seasons, I'm like, wow. In the back of my mind.
It's not readily known. Most people think of Arizona and envision cactuses and sand and hot.
Yeah.
And being here at 7,000 feet, our days rarely get above 85 degrees. And yeah, we do get to have snowball fights in winter.
Wow. Never in a million years would I think that you guys have 4 seasons and actual snow. So that's pretty cool.
Yes, we're very, very lucky here. It
Yeah.
is dry and it is sunny, but we are surrounded by a forest.
Oh wow, yeah, that sounds amazing. So I noticed you mentioned again, you guys opened the bookstore 2017. Taking over, not wanting your local bookstore to close. So with that said, I know you're a team of three, but what was the reaction like from your family and friends when you decided to say, "Hey, we're going to save the bookstore"? What was the reception like in the community as well?
The reception has been outstanding. I come from a retail background. I actually am a retailer in downtown Flagstaff with a Patagonia outdoor store.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't a foreign thing to have retail downtown, but to jump into the indie book industry was a whole leap of faith. My business partner Annette and I like to joke it was our temporary moment of insanity. And yeah, it was great. It was fast. It was within 3 weeks that we saw the for sale sign and make the quick choices. And my business partner Annette went to the Winter Institute and tried to learn as much as she could
Right.
quickly to open up in February. And my lovely husband agreed to come along for the ride. And so the three of us have been spinning ever since. But the community reaction has been remarkable. Everyone showed up. Everyone wanted to be a part of it as customers, as volunteers, as just community events and programming. So for that, we are incredibly grateful.
That sounds, again, like a great community effort, but man, you must really have been spinning on your wheels. 3 weeks is a quick turnaround time.
It was incredibly quick, but Annette and I share a tenacity for getting things off of a to-do list. So we just put it all on there, get an EIN, open a bank account, pick out a name, figure out a logo,
Yeah.
and then, oh, right, what's this whole selling books thing? Where are we going to find them in the store? Which books are we going to bring in? That was the real learning curve, is the day we got the keys.
Right, right, right. Absolutely. But on that note, what can someone who's never stepped foot into your bookstore, never stepped foot in Bright Side, what can they expect walking in? Give us a visual coming in from the front door. What's the first thing, people would see? And just take us on a little tour on the interior of the bookstore.
Certainly. I think our name embraces a lot of what our bookstore is. And interestingly enough, naming a business was more difficult than naming my son. We went through round and round. That was the most difficult part about buying this business, was coming up with a name. But we had a wonderful guide and friend in that. She's in visual marketing, and she really just pressed us to come up with the right name. And we kept coming back with different names. And finally, we told her Brightside. She said, "Well, that's exactly what it should be, because that's who you are, you, Annette, and Ben, the three of you. You
Mm-hmm.
are looking on the bright side. You are on the east side of the street. You are, the sunshine flows in through the front doors. It's you walk through our front doors, and it's a glass front doors on both sides, so books on display with a little bit of a raised kind of historic step up in there, so almost like a little nook where you can tuck in and read a book or have a
Right.
cup of coffee or watch the downtown community cruise by. And then we've got historic wood floors. It's a little bit creaky, which is lovely. And you look up, and we've got very, very tall ceilings, historic tall ceilings that used to have a copper ceiling in it, and that has since been painted, but it looks copper. And wall to wall books. We really pride ourselves in our lovely children's section. That's a little nook in the back left hand corner of the store, where kids can go and play with the train set or be read to in a comfortable, oversized leather chair with their parents. We chose not to do actual drinks or coffee in the building, because
Yeah.
we're surrounded by 10 downtown coffee shops that are awesome
Wow.
and incredible.
Yeah.
And so people can bring their coffee in from outside and
Right.
enjoy a cup of coffee as they peruse our selection.
Right, right. No, that sounds amazing. But what do you love the most though about being a bookseller?
I think, again, it's rooted in that theme that we've come upon here, is that community
Community.
interaction.
Mhm.
I've lived in this town since 1980, and so I have a long history with Flagstaff. And my family's owned a business here that we've purchased from my mom and dad, and so I've been in retail. I've known customers for 30 years, but to suddenly be in an industry and a community in which I didn't know all of our customers, and that was really incredible to get to know an entirely new section of our community
Yeah.
through this business. And then, like I said, that incredible support, not only people opening up their wallets, but just the wanting us to be successful, the sharing of information, the telling their friends about it, the coming in and supporting our events, and telling authors to call us up and ask if we would host a signing for them, and to want to have their group gatherings in our space. That's just been quite uplifting for me.
Oh, absolutely. And it's definitely something to love for sure. And in wrapping up, what do you want everyone listening to know about Bright Side Bookshop located in Flagstaff, Arizona?
Please come and visit us. It's a wonderful place to be here in Flagstaff. Whether you come in the summer and it's a beautiful 85-degree day, you could drive to the Grand Canyon with your new book, or come in the winter and enjoy a day on the slopes and then have a cup of tea or coffee while you unwind at our bookstore in the evening.
Alrighty, sounds like a plan. Lisa, thank you so much for coming on this show and talking about your bookstore and just everything books.
Victoria, thank you so much for inviting us. It was wonderful to visit with you.
Readers, you can connect with Bright Side Bookshop in Flagstaff, Arizona at their website, brightsidebookshop.com. You can also find them on Facebook at Bright Side Bookshop, on Instagram at BrightSideBooksFlag, and on Twitter at BrightSideFlag. If you'd like to tune in to the rest of my conversation with bookseller Lisa Lamberson, the full podcast episode will be available on our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/bibliofinder. To find an independent bookstore near you or when you're traveling, visit bibliofinder.com. Bibliofinder is a new online directory for independent bookstores, and they help users to find bookstores worldwide based on their current or planned location. If you're on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, please tag Bibliofinder in your indie bookstore photos. Before I get started with this week's new releases, I'd like to highlight one literary birthday happening this week as well. On February 18th, Toni Morrison, celebrated Pulitzer Prize-winning novelist, essayist, and professor, was born on this day in 1931. Morrison wrote 11 novels during her career, in addition to children's books, plays, and an opera, beginning with her debut novel, The Bluest Eye, in 1970. Now, I will be mentioning some of the books that will be available on bookshelves during the week of Monday, February 17th. And I'm thrilled to have author Graham Moore and Simone St. James on the show to talk about their new books. New this week from Simon & Schuster, The Second Chance Club, Hardship and Hope After Prison by Jason Hardy. In The Second Chance Club, a former parole officer shines a bright light on a huge yet hidden part of our justice system through intertwining stories of 7 parolees striving to survive the chaos that awaits them after prison. New this week from Scribner Books, Amnesty by Aravind Adiga. Amnesty is a story about a young illegal immigrant who must decide whether to report crucial information about a murder and thereby risk deportation. New from Simon Pulse, Of Curses and Kisses by Sandhya Menon. Of Curses and Kisses is the first novel in a brand new series set at an elite boarding school that's a contemporary spin on Beauty and the Beast. New from Little Brown & Company, The World Beneath Their Feet by Scott Ellsworth. Also new from Little Brown & Company, Blind Side by James Patterson and James O'Brien. This is book 12 in the Michael Bennett series. New from Hachette Books, Drug Warrior, Inside the Hunt for El Chapo and the Rise of America's Opioid Crisis by Jack Riley with Mitch Weiss. New this week from Ballantine Books, Here for It, or How to Save Your Soul in America, an essay collection by R. Eric Thomas. New in paperback from Ballantine Books, Last Boat Out of Shanghai, the epic story of the Chinese who fled Mao's revolution by Helen Zia. New in paperback from Del Rey Books, Gods of Jade and Shadow by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. New in paperback from SJP for Hogarth, Golden Child by Claire Adam. New this week from Random House is a new psychological thriller entitled The Holdout, and we have the author Graham Moore here with us to share all the details. Graham, welcome to Biblio Happy Hour.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
So, your new novel, The Holdout, will be available on bookshelves this week. How are you feeling right now? How excited are you?
I'm awfully excited. It's very funny writing a book because you spend so much time alone, typing away, in my case for a couple of years, and not too many people get to read it while you're working on it. It's myself, it's my editor, and so it's really just 2 or 3 people for a couple of years, and then suddenly you have this moment where you go, all right, the whole rest of the world, what do you folks think? So that's obviously a little bit nerve-wracking, but very, the word we're getting is that people seem to be enjoying it, and that's the most lovely thing for me. I don't get to, I always joke about this with being a novelist, I never get to sort of stand over someone's shoulder watching them read the book. All you can live on are sort of the nice messages people send you. So it is nice to get the sense that out there somewhere there are people starting to enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell our listeners about your new novel, The Holdout, and what can readers picking up this book, what can they expect?
I think people picking up this book can hopefully expect an exciting thriller that hopefully also is asking kind of big questions about the American criminal justice system. The book is about a woman who 10 years ago was on a jury in a high-profile murder case, and that trial resulted in a shocking acquittal. Now this woman, 10 years later, has had her whole life kind of defined by being on this jury, and finds herself in a new mystery as one of the other jurors from the trial 10 years ago is killed. And she has to figure out how these 2 crimes, the initial one and the new one, may be linked. I've lived in Los Angeles for about 10 years now. The story is set in Los Angeles in 2 different time periods, 10 years ago and today. And so it's been funny seeing a book that in some ways is not autobiographical, but in other ways is quite autobiographical. For me, it was all very much inspired by an experience I had serving on a jury in a murder trial 11 years ago. 11 years ago, I was on this jury, and myself and 11 strangers collectively voted to send a man who none of us had ever met to jail for the rest of his life. And that experience, those weeks on that trial, was one of the most emotionally wrenching experiences of my adult life. And this book is the outgrowth of that. It's the outgrowth of me spending 11 years since then thinking, gosh, I believe we were right. I'm quite confident that we were right. We all voted together. And yet, what if we were wrong?
Right. So I'm going to put you on the spot now, even though you mentioned, part of this novel was inspired by your personal experience, but who's your favorite character in this novel?
Oh, that's a great question. I think I identify the most with Maya, the novel's protagonist. She's someone who, I guess in some ways isn't like me, but she's someone who she's put in so many uncomfortable situations throughout the book, and really not just perilous situations, but really, emotionally wrenching situations. I think one of the things I admire about her is, like me, she's someone who keeps her calm in difficult situations and then can freak out about it later. My friends always make fun of me about that, but I'm someone who can be quite good in a crisis, and then weeks or months later, I have my, oh gosh, do you remember what just happened? Weeks ago, that was terrible. I kind of have my freak out about it. And I think that's something that Maya and I share.
Okay. Is there a particular scene in the novel that you resonated with, or that brought you back to that place where you were 11 years ago?
Yeah, one of the most exciting things for me about getting to write the book was that you see conversations being had by the 12 members of this jury, and you get to see those conversations from different perspectives. Different parts of the book go into the perspectives of different other jury members. And, when you're put on a jury in a difficult case like this, and this is very much my experience of it, you're thrown in a room with these 11 strangers, 11 people who you would never otherwise be in a room with. You would never have met them under any other circumstances, even though you all live in the same city, even in most cases in the same part of the city. And people from all walks of life, all different backgrounds, ages, races, genders, and you end up debating these really difficult questions of race and gender and economics and the city around you, and you're having debates with strangers, with people you don't even know, that would be difficult to have with your closest friends. Things you may not even have talked about with your closest friends, your family. Suddenly now you're debating them with utter strangers, and not only just debating them, but you're doing so with the fate of this other person's life hanging in the balance. And those arguments, those conversations among well-meaning people who have these honest disagreements, that experience was, for me, one of the most difficult and in some ways inspiring parts of my experience on the jury. And I've tried to render those conversations as meaningfully in the book as I had them when I served.
Right, absolutely. So getting into your writing process a bit now, how long did it take to write this novel?
Probably about 1.5 to 2 years on the Holdout. As I said, it was inspired by this experience that I had 11 years ago on this jury. And so for years, on these late nights, I would stay up thinking about the trial that had happened. And as the years passed, I just found that I couldn't shake it. I mean, this experience of sending a man to jail was so moving to me and so kind of difficult to live with that I spent for years and years, I just couldn't shake the feeling of it. And I'd always known that I'd wanted to write about it somehow, and I didn't know whether I wanted to write an essay or a film or a play. And then, I finally kind of hatched this idea to write a novel about it, kind of about the emotional experience that I had on this jury, even though I was going to create a fictional case, create some fictional characters around it. In the book, some people are kind of based on people I met on the jury. Others are not. It's sort of a bouillabaisse of real people and imagined people. Once I finally realized that, okay, I really want to write a novel about this, and this is how I'm going to do it, then it went what for me is very quick. Because I kind of have this background in historical fiction, I read as much as I could about memoirs from people who'd been on juries in high-profile cases. The murder case that I was on it wasn't high profile, it wasn't famous, it wasn't covered in the newspapers, but the fictional case is going to be quite high profile in my book. So I read memoirs of people who'd been on the O.J. Simpson jury, on the Scott Peterson jury, on the George Zimmerman jury, and watched a lot of interviews with them, interviews with people right after the trial, and then in fact some interviews with people, 10 or 15 years later, reflecting on their experience on these juries, and then just got to dive right in. I live in Los Angeles. I live in the neighborhood where a lot of this book is set, and it was sort of a funny experience because in my 2 previous novels and the films I've written, some of them are set in the past, some of them are set halfway across the world, but I'd never actually written about the place where I physically was before. It was amazing. I remember this one day early on in the writing process, I'm kind of trying to describe a scene, and our protagonist is walking somewhere, and I'm trying to imagine what it looks like, and it took me hours before I just realized, oh, I can just get in the car and drive over there and see what it looks like, and then describe that. That never even occurred to me as something I could do before,
Right.
because I never had. Yeah, so it was great. So once I realized that I could just drive around and take in the details of the world immediately around me, it all could move quite fast.
Right, absolutely. So you work in film, you write novels as well. So if you didn't do any of those things, the typical question is, if you didn't write, what would you do for work or as a creative pursuit? But I'm also going to yank film away from you, so you don't have that option. So what would you do for work or, again, as a creative pursuit?
Oh, that's a dastardly question because I'm not allowed to use film as a crutch to take it away from me. I think, honestly, my fantasy sometimes is having a dog boarding place. I think about this all the time. The guy who runs the doggy daycare place that I take my puppy to sometimes is a musician, and he and his wife, they live at home, and they both work at home, and they kind of have this big backyard, and people in the neighborhood can sort of drop their dogs off and back to play. And he composes and writes music sort of in the front of the house, and the dogs can play in the back, and we leave our dogs there sometimes. And it just seems like the most lovely life to me. Get to, be outside and get to kind of enjoy the world, and it's not just like you staring at a monitor all day, every day. I get very excited about the idea of doing anything that doesn't involve staring at a screen. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think that would be a ton of fun.
Okay, sounds good. So, getting into your reading life, what was the last book that you finished reading that you would now recommend?
That is an easy question because I finished it at 2 in the morning last night. My friend Sam Wasson has a book that just came out a week or two ago called The Big Goodbye, about the making of the film Chinatown.
Ah,
And he and I are actually going to do some readings together in Los Angeles at the end of February, because we both have books kind of about LA noir and LA murder mysteries. My novel is sort of a contemporary noir, and his is about the making of the film Chinatown. And I am fascinated by other people's creative processes,
mm-hmm.
especially processes that produce something as great as Chinatown. So for me to get to hear how those filmmakers, that writer, Robert Towne, got to sort of approach the process, how, in some ways, how disorganized it was, makes me so relieved. You go, oh, great, these people also have not figured out some great system for writing. They don't have it all figured out. They are just getting up every morning and staying up all night, trying to do the best thing they can, and it always comes out a bit garbled, and they're always doing a million drafts, and it never feels to them like they've quite latched onto the way they know they want to tell the story. And reading that every writer has a process that she feels is dysfunctional, I find immensely calming, because I'm always so convinced that my process is really dysfunctional, that I go, oh gosh, well those people have the same dysfunctional process. That's great. I feel like I'm not alone.
Right, absolutely. And we all like to feel like we're not alone. I think it's part of the reason why I actually asked that question, because I know a lot of creatives and readers and writers, they all listen to the podcast, so it's good to know, hey, you're not the only one who's a bit dysfunctional here.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
Absolutely. All right. So part of the podcast is all about indie bookstores and indie bookselling, and we always, carve out little bits of time to shout them out always on the show. So share with our listeners some of your favorite indie bookstores.
So I live in Los Angeles, pretty close to a bookstore called Skylight in the Los Feliz neighborhood, which is great. I buy a lot of my books there because it's big enough that they have a great selection, but still kind of intimately curated in the way that I think we all want a local independent book to be. It's on this kind of lovely drag of shops and bars and restaurants, and there's a couple of restaurants that I like right by there. So I frequently have the experience of going out, and I'm going to meet a friend for dinner, and I'm a couple minutes early, and you can just pop in and say, oh, what's interesting today, and talk to people who work there, and see what's in the front, and see what they're recommending, and grab a couple of last minute things that you wouldn't otherwise imagine yourself buying. I think that's something that I get the most excited by in local bookstores, in independent bookstores, is just walking in, not quite knowing what you want, and seeing where the experience takes you. I think I've found some of my favorite things in the world through that process.
Right, absolutely. All right, so getting back to the Holdout, how do you want readers to feel after reading this book? What are some of the reactions you're hoping for? What are some of the thoughts you're hoping they might have? Pretty much. What are you hoping for?
Yeah, I want readers to hopefully feel like they've had this, intense, thrilling experience. The book, it's a mystery, it's a thriller, but at the same time, it is hopefully asking these questions about how we deal with and perceive the people around us, and the misunderstandings that can happen, and some of the tragedies that can happen from those misunderstandings. I think one of the things that I found in my experience on a jury was that you get in there and you're not quite sure who else is going to be around, right? You don't know who these people are, you've just met them. And my experience was so moving to find how seriously everyone else took what we were doing. I mean, they give you the speech about the importance of taking the rules seriously and the decision you're going to make. And everyone not only followed the rules really assiduously, but really emotionally took the duty of what we were doing so seriously and really tried to do their best. And I think that's something I found inspiring personally, and then in kind of rendering that into this book, I found really fascinating dramatically. I have a friend who makes fun of me sometimes because she says, nothing I've ever written has had a villain in it. And I sort of said, I know, and I go, well, no, yeah, of course they do. I mean, mysteries and thrillers, but then I look back on them, and I look back at my two previous books, I look back on The Imitation Game, the film I wrote, and none of them, she's right, none of them quite have villains. There are people who are responsible for terrible things, but they're doing so with nothing but the best of intentions. And I think that question, what terrible things can happen or can be brought about by people with nothing but the best of intentions, was very much the animating spirit behind this book. I think all of the characters are in their hearts believe themselves to be good people, believe themselves to be helping, believe themselves to be nobly pursuing justice, and it is their misunderstandings with each other that cause the greatest tragedies in the book. And I think that ends up being, in my mind, a sort of synecdoche for, the civic experience we have around us. And I found my experience on a jury to be so moving because no one was who I imagined they would be. You see someone, you have a couple sentences of conversation with them, you imagine you know who he or she is, but everyone is so much stranger and so much more interesting than you might first imagine. And I think that's one of the things I was most excited to write about in the book and that I hope readers take away from it.
Right, awesome. Graham, thank you so much for coming on the show. Readers, The Holdout will be available in bookstores on Tuesday, February 18th.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
Readers, you can connect with author Graham Moore at his website, mrgrahammore.com. You can also find him on Facebook at Graham Moore Writer and on Twitter at Mr. Graham Moore. You can also tune in to the rest of my chat with Graham in our off-the-cuff discussion over on our Patreon page. He shares more about his writing process and his work schedule, how writing a novel is similar to or different from writing for screen, and projects he's currently working on. So head on over to patreon.com/bibliofinder and tune in to the rest of our conversation. New this week from Viking Books, The Ones We've Been Waiting For, How a New Generation of Leaders Will Transform America by Charlotte Alter. Also new from Viking, The Lucky Star by William T. Wallman. Also new from Viking, Whistleblower, My Journey to Silicon Valley and Fight for Justice at Uber by Suzanne Fowler. New this week from Riverhead Books, Real Life by Brandon Taylor. Real Life has been described as a novel of startling intimacy, violence, and mercy among friends in a Midwestern university town. New in paperback from Riverhead Books, Bangkok Wakes to Rain by Pichaya Sudbanthad. New this week from Penguin Press, Golden Gates, Fighting for Housing in America by Connor Daughtery. Golden Gates is a deeply reported investigation into the housing crisis. New in paperback from G.P. Putnam's Sons, Call Me Evie by J.P. Pomer. New this week from Dutton Books, The Genius of Women, From Overlooked to Changing the World by Janice Kaplan. New this week from Berkeley Books, 1 Minute Out by Mark Greenry. This is book 9 in the Grey Man series. Also new from Berkeley Books, The Antidote for Everything by Kimmery Martin. In The Antidote for Everything, 2 doctors travel a surprising path when they must choose between treating their patients and keeping their jobs. Also new from Berkeley Books, Death in the Family by Tessa Wiegert. This is book 1 in a Shannon Merchant novel series. New this week from Berkeley Books is a new thriller suspense novel entitled The Sun Down Motel. And we have the author Simone St. James here with us to share all the details. Simone, welcome to Biblio Happy Hour.
Hi there. Nice to be here.
So your new novel, The Sun Down Motel, will be available on bookshelves in the US this week. How are you feeling? How excited are you?
It's actually really exciting. All the early reviews have been really good, and I've been getting a great response from readers who are really connecting with it, which is what I hoped for, what every author hopes for. So yeah, so far I've been getting lots of messages in my social media and lots of readers loving it. So it's been really exciting.
So tell our listeners, tell them about the Sun Down Motel and what can readers expect going in?
It's got 2 timelines. It's one of those double timeline books. And in the past, a young woman in 1982, she's in upstate New York, and she takes a job as a night clerk in this rundown hotel in the middle of nowhere in upstate New York. And she works nights, and in the middle of one of her shifts, she vanishes and is never seen again. And then in the present timeline, that first heroine's niece, who never met her aunt, decides that she's going to dig into the family mystery of what happened to her vanished aunt. And she goes back to the same town, and she goes back to the same motel, and the motel is unchanged from 1982. And they have a sign up that they need a night shift clerk, so she takes the same job as her aunt in the same town and begins to find out what happened in 1982.
Okay, so what inspired you to write the Sun Down Motel? Where did you gather your inspiration?
Well, from a lot of things. You know, I love true crime. There's a lot of true crime in this book, and I love reading it. I love true crime podcasts, and I love Stranger Things, and I love Psycho, and I love The Shining, and I love a lot of Stephen King books. So I kind of thought, you know, wouldn't it be awesome if there was a novel that just sort of had all those things mixed into one, and it doesn't exist, so I had to write it. So I wrote it. It's basically just a lot of things that I love mixed into one story, and I tried to make it as good as I could.
Right. Okay. So who would you say is your favorite character in the novel?
Well, I have two heroines in the novel, one in 1982 and one in 2017, and I love both of them a lot. They're a little bit different. In 1982, the heroine is Viv Delaney, and she was unhappy at home, and she's 20 years old, and she's decided she's going to go make it in New York City as an actress. And she doesn't get very far. She only gets as far as upstate New York, and she kind of stalls there, and she ends up at this motel. So she's kind of a neat character because she's really wanted this one thing and kind of ended up somewhere else and kind of discovered parts of herself that she wouldn't really have fit in New York City, and she kind of discovers different parts of herself by being stuck in this town. And then in the present day, her niece Carly is she's a more modern young woman who's left college, and she's like, in the beginning of the book, you know, she's really keen, and she thinks she's going to like right all these wrongs and solve all these problems, and, you know, really dig into this and just make everything right. And she's just got a real, you know, she's got a real optimistic outlook, and she comes across a lot of challenges in this book. But I just really liked her as a person. She's just the kind of person you just kind of want to hang out with if you knew her. So I really love both of those heroines, which is why they both of them just take up most of the book.
Right. Okay. So is there a particular scene in the novel that you enjoyed writing the most, or is there a scene that you resonated with personally?
Well, there is one scene that's a climactic scene that I really loved writing, but I can't tell you what it is because it would give a lot of the plot away.
Okay.
There's one near the end that I just got a lot of satisfaction out of writing, and It was kind of fun. But other than that, I made up the town of Fell, New York, this weird, creepy town that's kind of stuck in time. They still have like paper phone books, and there's still like a film developing store, and like it's kind of a neat sort of weird sort of stuck in time town. And I really enjoyed building that town and all the details and having both of my heroines and their different timelines traveling around the town. That was a lot of fun to write, a lot of fun.
Awesome. So getting into your process a bit, how long did it take to write the Sun Down Motel, start to finish?
I think it's hard to say because there's so many revisions, but probably around 14 months, maybe a little longer to get the whole thing mostly done. And then beyond that, it was copy edits and searching for typos and those kind of small things. But I'd say 14 months is probably for the bulk of it, yeah.
Okay. So if you didn't write, what would you do for work or as a creative pursuit?
Oh my gosh, I can't imagine not writing. I don't think I'd be achieving very much. I'd probably be working at a coffee shop or something. I don't know. Yeah, I'd probably work at a Starbucks if I wasn't writing. Because there's nothing else that I'm really passionate about. So There's nothing else that I would really put 100 or 200% into the way I do with this. So
right.
Yeah, I'd be slinging coffee for sure.
All right. So getting into your reading life, what was the last book that you finished reading that you would now recommend?
Well, one of the many wonderful perks of being a published author is that your publisher will send you books that haven't been published yet, and you get them ahead of time. And especially if you're really nice and you ask really nicely, they'll send you a bunch of books before they're out. So that's what I did. I was like, right before Christmas, I said, can I have some books? And they sent me some books, and none of them were out yet. But the last one that I read, and it comes out in March, It's called Darling Rose Gold. It's a thriller about a psychological thriller about, I don't want to give too much away. It's about a young woman whose mother went to prison for child abuse and then has just gotten out of prison, and the mother and the daughter are reuniting, and you're kind of trying to figure out how these two people are going to interact.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very dark and twisted in the best possible way. It's really well written.
Yay.
And it comes out in March. It's excellent. Yeah, I really liked it a lot.
Okay, awesome. So part of the podcast is all about indie bookstores and indie book selling, and we're always looking for an opportunity to shout them out. So share with our listeners some of your favorite indie bookstores.
To say, I have to give a really huge shout out to a bookstore in Houston called Murder by the Book. They are an indie murder mystery bookstore. And they've been, I went there on my book tour for my last book. I'm going again this year. And they have been such huge advocates of books and my books, and they have a lot of great authors that they promote, and they have tons of events, and they're just really huge book lovers, and they're just really out there in their community, getting everybody out to come out and read and talk to authors, and find new authors and find new books they're going to love. So they've been incredible to me and incredible to a lot of authors. They're a great place.
So getting back to the Sun Down Motel, how do you want readers to feel after reading this book? What are the reactions you're hoping for?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess with every book, I just really want readers to sit down and just be taken right out of their life for a couple of hours. Just be gone from everyday life for a couple of hours, take a little vacation. That's always what I'm aiming for with every book. It's not like I want to, change the world with every book or change, literature with every book. I want readers to pick up the book and just go on a trip. And whenever I hear readers say, like I was stressed out, or sometimes I get emails and they're like, in the middle of exams, or someone I love's in the hospital and I had to sit in the waiting room, and your book just took me away for a few hours, and that's the best compliment I can get. I really love when I hear that, because that's really what I'm hoping for.
Right, absolutely. Simone, thank you so much for coming on the show. Listeners, the Sun Down Motel will be available in bookstores on Tuesday, February 18th.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been great. Thank you so much.
Readers, you can connect with author Simone St. James at her website, SimoneSt.James.com. You can also find her on Facebook and Instagram at Simone St. James, and on Twitter at Simone_St. James. You can also tune in to the rest of my chat with Simone in our off-the-cuff discussion over on our Patreon page. She shares more about her work schedule and where she gets most of her writing done, how publishing her first books has changed her process of writing, and projects she's currently working on. So head on over to patreon.com/bibliofinder and tune in to the rest of our conversation. New this week from Harper Paperbacks, When You Read This by Mary Adkins. New this week from Park Row Books is a twisty new psychological thriller entitled The Other Misses by Mary Kubica. Also new from William Morrow Books, No Bad Deed by Heather Chavez. New this week from FSG Books, Living Weapon, a poetry collection by Roanne Ricardo Phillips. New from Picador, The Perfect Liar by Thomas Christopher Green, Mother Country by Irina Rain, and Queen Bey, a celebration of the power and creativity of Beyonce Knowles Carter by Veronica Chambers. New this week from Celadon Books, Saint X by Alexis Shatkin. New this week from Minotaur Books, The Last Passenger by Charles Finch. This is book 13 in the Charles Lennox Mystery Series. New this week from St. Martin's Press, Twilight of the Gods by Scott Oden. This is book 2 in the Grimness series. New in paperback from Bloomsbury Publishing, The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. Readers, if you need a more tailored selection of books to keep on your radar, or you want to hear more from your favorite authors that we've had on the show, become a patron at patreon.com/bibliofinder. For $1 per month, you'll get our monthly top shelf recommendations of new releases that we're super excited about. You'll also hear more from your favorite authors in our off-the-cuff discussions. You'll get our full Meet the Bookseller podcast episodes, get bookish-themed Instagram templates, plus lots more. That's patreon.com/bibliofinder. I've included a link in the show notes so you can sign up there. New this week from Tin House Books, Good Boys, a poetry collection by Megan Fernandez. New this week from Grove Atlantic, Second Sister by Chan Ho Kei, translated from Chinese by Jeremy Tang. The Second Sister is a novel of cyberbullying and revenge, and about a woman on the hunt for the truth about her sister's death. New in paperback from Grove Atlantic, The Bird King by G. Willow Wilson. El Norte, the epic and forgotten story of Hispanic North America by Carrie Gibson. The Club by Takis Werger. And House Arrest by Mike Lawson. New this week from Counterpoint Press, Not Even Immortality Lasts Forever. Mostly True Stories by Ed McClannon. Readers, I hope you enjoyed today's show. A list of all the books mentioned in the show will be available over at bibliohappyhour.com. To shop all the books I've mentioned in the show and to find a bookstore near you or when you're traveling, visit bibliofinder.com. If you're on Twitter or Facebook, please let us know at Biblio Happy Hour and tag us in your post over on Instagram, also at Biblio Happy Hour. If you enjoy listening to our podcast, please share Biblio Happy Hour with your favorite bookish friends, share us on social media, and please leave us a rating and review. Don't forget, Biblio Lifestyle newsletter subscribers are the first to know all the podcast happenings, get free goodies in the mail, and they can enter for a chance to win some free books. So if you're not on the list, sign up now for our free weekly delivery at bibliolifestyle.com. I've included a link in the show notes so you can sign up there. Alrighty readers, that's it for today's show. Thank you so much for listening and happy reading.